Giornata, sono felice di poter introdurre Beatriz Colomina. Beatriz Colomina è una professoressa di storia dell'architettura presso la Princeton University, dove ha altresì fondato il programma interdisciplinare Media and Modernity. La sua ricerca ruota attorno a diversi temi, tra quali architettura, design, arte, sessualità e mass media. Ha scritto moltissimo, tra i suoi libri ricordiamo Sexuality and Space, Privacy and Publicity, Modern Architecture as Mass Media, Domesticity at War, X-Ray Architecture e nel 2022 Radical Pedagogies. Nel 2016 è stata co-curatrice insieme a Mark Wigley della terza Biennale di Design di Istanbul, è dottore honoris causa del KTH Royal Institute of Technology di Stoccolma e nel 2020 le è stato assegnato il premio Ada Louise Huxtable per il suo contributo al campo dell'architettura. Beatriz darà uno speech di circa 20 minuti e poi Stefano Boeri e Nina Bassoli si siederanno con lei sul palco per una breve discussione. Grazie.
Grazie Giorgio, grazie a Stefano Boeri per l'invito a essere questa sera con voi. Sono molto contenta di essere in questa conferenza tanto interessante. Mi dispiace tantissimo non poter parlare italiano, ma faremo quello che possiamo. Sì, è una consolazione, l'inglese non è anche la mia lingua, sì? Siamo tutti nello stesso livello. Allora, le immagini sono qua. Ok. The talk I'm going to give is towards trans-species architecture in this invocation of the name of the city of Roma in this event. Immediately brought to my mind the name of my favorite Roman architect, Lina Bobardi, born in this city December 1914, where she also studied architecture. This is a time there are no women in architecture practically. I think there were 256 in Rome, and there were only 3 women. Lina then moved to Milano during the Second World War, and eventually to Brazil at the end of the war. And here you have in El Cantiere del MASPI, del Museum of Modern Art of Sao Paulo, that she built in Sao Paulo. Well, this watercolor is, maybe I can go back. No, yeah. The watercolor is actually a self-portrait that she did of as a young girl, an adolescent girl. As you can see, she's sitting astride this metal garden chair in a very kind of masculine pose that is common to Mediterranean men, right? So sitting with the chair at the back. She has short hair, a hint of lipstick, thick horizontal eyebrows, delicate dress. She's looking directly at us, focused, knowing. This is Lina, strong and seductive, masculine and feminine, inviting yet distancing. Aquilina Bo had been an anxious child growing up, anxious even of Rome itself, afraid of what she called its damaged beauty. As a kid, she says, I was afraid of the beauty of Rome and asked myself, why is everything in ruins? All her life she was, as you will see, obsessed with ruins. Ruins of past civilizations, ruins of wars, ruins of earthquakes, all kinds of ruins. She claimed actually to have lived through an earthquake when she was still inside her mother. She writes, 15 days before my birth I experienced the earthquake of Avezzano in my mother's womb. Apparently, this is incorrect. She was already 5 weeks old when the earthquake occurred. Does it change anything? Apparently, this inaccuracy drives crazy all the scholars of Bo, which accuse her of all kinds of crimes for this. And also, this kind of scholarship of Bo many times takes the form of a kind of a police interrogation. Do they ask the same questions of our male architects who all romanticize, of course, their histories as part of their self-constructions, part of the work itself? It is as if poetry was illegal. If it is illegal, then why bother to write about Lina? In fact, it's precisely this association she makes between earthquake and womb that takes us to the truth of Bo. It deepens our understanding of her emotional and intellectual position. Earthquake is birthing, destruction as the beginning of something. Even when she moved to Milano The ruins, of course, follow her. Mussolini entered the war in June 10th, 1940. That is a month after she arrived in Milan, and the city was bombed 10 times between then and December, right? 6 months, 10 times bombing. And she experienced this incredible bombing of the city in a time when she realized when nothing was built, only destroyed, in her own words. Both described the city in flames, crumbling buildings, and the terror of constantly running to bomb shelters. There were even bunker hotels in Milan at that time, as she published herself in the magazine A later on. On the morning of August 13, the building where Bo had her office with Carlo Pagani in Via Gesù, and here is Lina in front of her own office, and house was demolished, burying everything in the rubble. She lost everything, all the drawings, everything. In a symptomatic mixing of architecture, art, media, and intimate relationships, surrealism, and anxiety, Bo recalled that she and an architecture schoolmate and surrealist painter, that you see here, Fabrizio Clerici, were at their house one night and they were caught in a bombing because they had missed the alarm. And they were running through the streets of Milano to the shelter, holding hands, when Clerici suddenly stopped and laughed at the fact that they must look like ragazzi disastranti, the ragazzi illustrati that apparently were illustrated by the painter Achille Beltrami during the First World War in the covers of La Domenica del Corriere. I didn't find the one she was referring to, but this is actually London. This just was to give you a sense of the kind of illustration. This, according to Lina, produced a sense of sheer calm in this moment of deep panic, which remained until they arrived at the Scala shelter, only to find the door already closed, already locked, but Clerici somehow negotiated for them to open the door, and she says that he struck a cat for hours until the attack ended. So there is here no line between realism and surrealism, as there never will be with Lina, who I think you can argue that found a way for architecture to stroke animals in the face of danger. The war made Bo anxious, and how could it not be, right? And yet this seems to have baffled even her closest colleagues, including her partner, Carlo Pagani, who himself was deployed to Corsica and injured during a torpedo attack that sank his ship, but nevertheless expressed his frustration with Bo's capricious and erratic behavior while in charge of the office and the magazine Lo Stile. They were doing this magazine together that they had been co-editing, and all the other magazines that they were doing during the war, like Domus, Quaderni di Domus, Tempo, Grazia, Cordelia, Vetrina, Negozio, and basic magazines that one should look more closely. They are not even in the archives of Lina. Mark and I have been collecting, Mark Wigley and I have been collecting these magazines like crazy for years, and we have these amazing projects that you find inside them. The tire goddess, la dea estanca, Valentino Bompiani, the influential Milan publisher, said of Lina Bobardi, a goddess then, a powerful figure, a force in a hyper-masculine world which is now threatened by the savagery of war. She was overwhelmed with anxiety, but so were many soldiers and citizens, including countless artists and intellectuals. Should we count this against them? Right? Why all the critics of Bo always point to this anxiety that she felt? Not by chance, when Lina found a bi-weekly magazine, Attualità, Architettura, Abitazione, Arte, that is News, Architecture, Home, Arte, with Bruno Cevi and Carlo Pagani, war is again the central theme. The first issue was actually February 1946, but they were preparing the magazine for 2 years before. A is for anxiety, wrote Lina Bo about the magazine. You can see the amputated fingers of the hands of a Bernini statue, which obviously in this context evokes for me the amputations of war, right, and the wounding of Italy. A, as you can see on the right, is also for atomic bomb. In the first issue, this close-up photograph of a shocked and frightened child face is juxtaposed with images of the atomic bomb exploding in Hiroshima and the first atomic test in the Jornada del Muerto desert of New Mexico. The accompanying text of Cebi that you can read there, La bomba atómica pone nuovi problemi di cultura, the atomic bomb poses new problems of culture, suggests that the new madness of humanity takes the form of collective suicide when the whole of humanity could be incinerated in 1 hour. Sounds like the kinds of things that we are now feeling again, right? What now the issue was dedicated to the destruction caused in Italy during World War II, and illustrated with images that in a tour of the south of Italy that Boeri and her partner Pagani had taken in 1945, a few days after the end of the war, with the photographer Federico Patellani, and commissioned by the anti-fascist newspaper Milano Sera, who proceeded then not to publish the images, and then his wife, she published them in the magazine A, and here she is with children the day of the liberation of Milan. Godbo, arriving now in Brazil, most like about Brazil when she arrives there in 1947 was precisely the absence of ruins. I felt like I was in an imaginable country where everything was possible. I felt happy, and Rio had no ruins. Right? So Brazil was her new starting point. The Lina Boeri of Brazil was born out of an anxiety of a ruined Europe, but in a kind of return of the repressive, if you want, the ruins reappear. Think, for example, I always think of these jagged holes in the Sex Pompeia. I found them totally reminiscent of the holes left in buildings after bomb blasts. Think of the way she always presents her work as if it was already in ruins. Think about of how many projects of her are now literally in ruins, like this Coty restaurant in Salvador that I saw last June again. As architecture dissolves, the plants, the animals, and the insects enter and become the real clients of her architecture, so the strict lines between inside and outside give way to a new kind of hospitality to everything that architecture normally keeps out, the plants, the animals, etc. But this is not an accident or a neglect. It is designing to the project from the very beginning, as you just saw here. She is designing already this ruin. And it's not just Brazil, by the way. She designs plants occupying buildings as if the humans had already left the building, or perhaps since the humans had been extinguished. This is so incredible. There's no building, just plants, Stefano? And we could talk about this later. But also, very clearly, when she designed her Casa de Vidro, the glass house in Sao Paulo in 1949, which is really like a tree house suspended in the forest, she draws, and this is incredible for an architect, she draws every insect, every plant, and every animal that was living in the site already with the same precision that she draws the building. For her, they are part of the building. If architecture has always been about keeping the bugs out, Lina embraces this trans-species architecture where, as you can see in this incredible drawing, the insects are not the enemy, but intelligent members of the community, and humans are just maybe temporary guests. She made exhibitions and plays for children, also about this new understanding of community, imagining spaces with insect, animals, and plants are the real occupants, like here, this in Teatro per Crianças, theater for children. Don't step on the ants, don't kill the cockroaches, right? I mean, instructing the children on respecting the insects. For Lina, architecture is architecture only in as much as it is dissolved by other species. Even her dramatic demonstrations of geometry and force, like the remarkable Museum of Art in Sao Paulo, were originally drawn as if they were occupied and eaten by plants. You see all these incredible drawings. This is part, of course, of a political ethic of celebrating and learning from other species. And I'm bringing all of this, even herself in this house. Herself is dissolving the plants. It's like she is a plant. in this column, right? She has become a plant. This brings me to what I wanted to as an example of what I wanted to talk about, which is about intra-species architecture, because human-centered design sounds good, but it's actually terrible, has been terrible for humans, for other species, and for the planet. And, you know, it's very interesting to me that Western architecture has always been understood in terms of this body, this human, which tends to be, is always an athletic, white, male body that we see from the Renaissance to nowadays, from Leonardo to Le Corbusier, which is a perfected body immersed in this geometric system of proportions. And this, of course, is a fiction that excludes most of humanity, because imagine that, for example, that you happen to be white and male and Western and also athletic and good-looking and everything. How long does this last? As we were just talking with Sandro Balducci, right? It lasts for a very short time, even if you happen to be in this then how is it that for so many centuries, architecture has maintained this fiction, that this is who are we working for? Actually, the real body of architecture, in my view, is a very fragile body, prone to sickness or already sick, a body in need of support. And architecture is that kind of cocoon, a kind of artificial, if you want, skin for this fragile creature that has to be maintained at 37 degrees centigrade. Protected against the outdoor elements, but also against all these threats, all these diseases, all these mental instabilities, traumas, fears, anxiety, loneliness. And this is what I think we should think about when we think about architecture. But even if you are very interested in the human, then you are not obsessed with one thing, but this endless trans-species collaboration. The human is just a bag of bacteria, which is this bacteria which is billions of years old, and we just happen to be just a recent arrival, and it turns out to be that we are already on our way out, right? So we are nothing without these foreigners, without this bacteria. And bacteria, of course, is the first form of life. A minute ago, we were talking about the importance of architecture for life. The first form of life on this planet is bacteria, which is 4 billion years old. And bacteria is what makes plants possible and what makes trees possible, and therefore what makes architecture possible. But bacteria is usually treated in architecture as this invisible enemy that needs to be exterminated by all means. So even if you are obsessed with the human is actually not one thing, but an endless, complex, and ever-changing trans-species collaboration. The human is just a bag of bacteria. 40 trillion bacteria are in our bodies, mainly in the digestive tract. And it's not even a bag, but really like a tube. The human is wrapped around this 8 meters tube of the intestine, and there are 4,000 species of bacteria in this tract. In fact, there are more bacteria in the gut than human cells, and the human cells depend on that bacteria. This is what is called the microbiome. The microbiome, this complex internal community, sustains the body, the immune system, the health, but also the brain and the emotions. It's been demonstrated now that the microbiome is totally responsible for many of the cases that now are increasing radically of mental problems, right? It's precisely the lack of diversity of our bacteria. And for a long time we have been popping pills trying to solve this problem, only to destroy more the microbiome. Anyway, why is this important? Is it to architecture? We could say it's medicine. No, it's very important to architecture, because modern architecture was phobic about bacteria from the very beginning. Robert Koch, this is of course the entrance of Villa Savoie. We have always thought about this sink as like this sculptural object that Le Corbusier loved. Even myself may have written about it at the entrance, like the new industrial object, but you know, we are also washing our hands as we go into the house. Very important to think that this is just a few years after the 1918 flu epidemic, right? The importance of the pandemics on architecture is another topic that I have developed recently. Anyway, Robert Koch first demonstrated the link between specific bacteria and diseases like anthrax, tuberculosis, and cholera in the late 1870s and 80s, and launched a kind of media campaign against this invisible enemy. Right? He makes these incredible drawings and even photographs and exposes them in the great exhibition of London, but also in the Berlin exhibition on the left of 1882-83, and the year after in London, where the public could actually look at living bacteria from Koch's laboratory through a series of microscopes, allowing them to imagine their bacteria inside the body. So you hear here the tuberculosis bacilli. So at that time, that 1 in 4 in the planet was dying of tuberculosis, the public could look through the microscope and envision the pathogens that were most likely living in their gut, because even if you didn't have tuberculosis, it was there, except that the good bacteria was keeping it in check, right? But they were looking at their own interior, right? The exhibition actually promoted also a new series of protocols for the design of the house and the city. Here you have, of course, you have to have the new installations like the water closet, but there is also a huge simplification and cleaning of what the interior is. It may not look very modern because we are in 1880, but it's very modern, right? Architecture, in other words, became the first line of defense against this invisible enemy. And houses start to look, of course, like sanitized laboratories. Leopold Bauer, for example, Resik Villa of 1901 was designed according to the hygiene principle in the same year that his professor, his teacher, Otto Wagner, complained about Vienna culture of bacteria and called for architects to develop a new architecture according to the latest hygiene techniques. For example, he argued that the design of a hotel room should not be any different than the design of a hospital room. Incidentally, Otto Wagner died of a bacterial infection in his own house. And you know, I mean, it's pathetic, but I think maybe he, with all this money of cleaning and everything, he eliminated the good bacteria that would have probably balanced. So anyway, it's kind of interesting. It was not until 1928 that the first modern antibiotic was accidentally discovered, penicillin. But of course, there was already an antibiotic attitude towards building. Already in 1911, at a popular level, home magazines were advising women to leave petri dishes around the house in their living room to see whether the bacteria had survived their cleaning practices. So the housewife becomes like a bacteriologist, and the house is now her laboratory. Modern architecture simply channeled this antibiotic approach. Le Corbusier, obsessed with bacteria, he quoted counts of bacteria per cubic meter in the year. He describes himself as a bacteriologist, and architecture and city planning as laboratory work. 19th century was demonized as architecture was demonized as an unhealthy germ. Look at the poster of the Weissenhof Siedlung. You know, normally in a poster you put what you are going to do, right? But this one is not like what you are not going to do. Like, what are we killing? We are killing the 19th century interior full of carpets and bric-a-brac that accumulates dust, and dust is tuberculosis. Right? That was the association that they made at the time. I thought it was an old wives' thing, but it's not. I mean, if you have tuberculosis and you spit, and this sputum now is dry, 15 days later it's still contagious. But if you are exposed to the sun, if you expose this sputum to the sun, in a few minutes it's neutralized. So they didn't know, but they were onto something, right? So when modern architecture argued for white walls and terraces and ventilation and all of this, they actually did something in many ways good for humanity. All these things were presented, even in the Weissenhof Siedlung, as antidotes, as architectural sterilizers. So modern architecture, in a way, was an antibiotic before there was antibiotic, right? It's only modern in as much as it's free of bacteria. And it's not just these European guys, Le Corbusier, Mies, etc. But, I mean, look at this. This is unbelievable, because this association between modern architecture and tuberculosis that we have tried to suppressed for so long. No history of modern architecture will make the connection until I wrote my own book a few years ago. But this is 1952. The most important architectural magazine in Spain superimposes an X-ray of the lungs with the sun and with modern architecture, in case we have missed the point. When you read all these architects, they are all obsessed with tuberculosis, all of them, Le Corbusier, Loos, all of them. Why? They were all dying. 1 in 4 people in the planet was dying of tuberculosis, but in big cities like Paris, was 1 in 3. So we think that COVID was terrible, but imagine the trauma that modern architecture responded to. Buckminster Fuller was also a huge germaphobe. His Diamaxion house was also an antibacterial house. It's all a response to his daughter, Allegra, who died also of tuberculosis at the age of 4, and she blamed the architecture they were living in. It's kind of a tragic story too, but it was what led him to develop this Diamaxion house. The Inns, actually, 1944. Well, here is before the war. They are still in the neutral apartments. I love the Inns. Who doesn't love the Inns with their beautiful attitude, the colorful, the plants, etc. But look at what they write about what is a house in 1944, preparing for what the house will be in the post-war years. They argue that the house of the post-war house will be sprayed with chemicals every 6 months to make it totally free of insects, and that the electronic devices will continuously remove bacteria from the air. So this obsession with removing all the poor insects and the bacteria. Same with Allison and Peter Smithson, 1956, House of the Future, where they say very proudly that all the food is bombarded with gamma rays, an atomic byproduct to kill bacteria. The whole house is this hyper-clean space, a kind of molded plastic capsule, enter, by the way, through this decontamination chamber. So what kind of world do we imagine outside for this house of the future, all happiness and with all the, when we have to pass through an electronic decontamination space before we enter the house. Well, anyway, so all these people obsessed with bacteria, and nevertheless modern architecture end up producing sickness. For example, the sick syndrome building, where the air conditioning system that Le Corbusier celebrated precisely for isolating the inside air from the contaminated outside air. Buildings, what does he say there? Bâtiments hermétiques. Hermetic buildings. That turned out to be a disaster, right? It turned out to be that the building became a vector of disease. Reducing, in other words, the diversity of bacteria has been a disaster for humans. Buildings are like expanded gas, if you want. Buildings have their own microbiome. And this diversity of bacteria in spaces is just as important as the diversity in the gut. The bacteria of the building continually enters the human body, and the bacteria in the human is spread across the building. Right now we are exchanging bacteria, and we are also exchanging bacteria with this presumably very clean red space. Again, there is no strict line between the body and the building. In fact, the building could be said to be an expansion of the gut. We are a way of sharing the gut with other humans and other species. I'm working now with Mark Wigley with an interdisciplinary group of scientists on the microbiome of the built environment precisely. And one of them is the microbial ecologist actually, Maria Gloria Dominguez Bello. She cracked a mystery. They were, the medical community could not understand why children born out of cesarean, they had health problems that were sometimes inexplicable. It turns out to be that a child born out of a cesarean section, a year after they are born, they still have bacteria that was in the room in which they were born. So these supposedly sterile rooms where operations take place are full of bugs. And because the baby didn't pass through the beneficial bacteria of the vagina of the mother, That's why if they happen to be a bad bug in the space, they could have really incomprehensible problems. They are trying now to wipe the liquids of the vagina in the baby to see whether this will counter the problem. But the problem is much bigger than that, because the problem is that we have lost the diversity of bacteria that we used to have. So it's nothing that can be resolved so easily. The people in the planet, apparently, that have the healthiest or the richest microbiome, the richest diversity, are in the indigenous Amazon in the indigenous tribes of the Amazon. Yeah, and this lack of diversity is, according to these biologists that we work, a real killer. The age of antibiotics and antibiotic architecture is threatening our species. Martin Blaser is another scientist we work with, talks about the silent extinction of microbes, and he argues, listen to this, that the crisis of diminishing diversity of the human microbiome is a bigger threat to the species than climate change, right? So that's why they are going down to the Amazon and collecting seed in the indigenous communities living in the deep forest, and they're establishing a world bank of bacteria that we have already lost, because many of the problems of our time, many forms of obesity, many forms of cancer, all these incomprehensible autoimmune disorders, all these allergies. When I went to school, there was nobody with allergies. There was nobody that could not take I don't remember any of that. It's a new thing, and it has all to do with the lack of bacteria. So we are implicated in as much as architecture contributes to this lack of diversity. So this is Maria González Bello. So what will be a probiotic architecture? Of course, I talk about Lina Bo because we are in Rome, and because I love Lina Bo, and I think it's a great example of the way to go. Probably this probiotic architecture will be more like our gut, more porous versus the prophylactic attitudes of modern architecture. The immune system doesn't keep foreign organisms out. It regulates a kind of dynamic balance between insiders and outsiders. And architecture, too, could be a way of bringing the other in. The very idea of shelter could change from keeping the dangers out to bringing them in. To really shelter the species means exposing it to multiple others. This might mean experimenting with the idea of rewilding the interior. We used to live intimately with all the bacteria of the soil, the plants, and other animals. I mean, we may want to reconnect with this diversity of bacteria and embrace it. Thank you.
Grazie. Non so se continuiamo in italiano o in inglese.
No, io posso anche parlare italiano.
Or no, if the public is okay, we can also continue in English, okay? Facciamo un po' così, in tipico stile italiano.
Spanish.
In una modalità molto porosa anche.
If somebody has a question in Italian, is it working? No. If somebody has a question in Italian, no funciona. If somebody has a question in Italian, it's okay, I can understand it. Okay?
Sì, direi di fare un po' in inglese e un po' in italiano per riprendere i bellissimi argomenti di Beatriz Colomina, un'intelligenza incredibile, ma secondo me, prima di tutto, Beatriz ha fatto un grande regalo a Stefano Boeri con questa lecture, con questa introduzione. Hai già posto una domanda a Stefano a metà della lecture un po' en passant, dicendo l'edificio non c'è più, ci sono solo le piante, no? Un po' questo glielo hai chiesto.
Sì, English or Italian? English, okay. So no, I when we were not. We have finished to build a vertical forest in Milano 11 years ago. At a certain moment, we started to think how to guarantee, let's say, safety and health of the plants. And our botanists were completely against the idea to use fertilizers. So the issue was how we could fight the acars that are the enemies of trees, basically. And the idea was, let's buy thousands of ladybugs. So I really didn't know how to do, but there was a friend who knew that in Germany, in Stuttgart, there was an insect breeder who was selling ladybugs. So we called him, we went to visit him, and finally he sent us 9 boxes with 9,000 ladybugs, small ladybugs. And so we started to distribute ladybugs in the 2 towers, basically were every 10 floors, every 10 floor, and the other one. And what they told us, well, you had to simply put them on the soil, on the pots, and then you had to wait basically 2 months, and they will start to move to the other floor. Okay, this was so. We were at the moment the opening of the building was very close. I think it was 1 week just before the opening. What's happened that we didn't know that ladybugs were very, very, very fast in their, let's say, multiplication. So basically, in 2 weeks, they were covering the 2 towers, and in 1 month, they were starting to cover the other building around. So in a certain way, it was a disaster. And we started to receive, let's say, reaction and from all the neighbors saying, well, you have what is happening, we have, so we're lucky where ladybugs were not mosquitoes, but this is simply a stupid example of how when you introduce living nature in our, let's say, pure, or we live pure environments, we accept unpredictability. We accept that we really cannot plan or perfectly control the result of this introduction. And this is just an example of what is happening when you are talking about if our ability to accept the introduction of something which is not under our control in our life. And from a certain point of view, I believe that Patrick Geddes was the one who first started. I think Richard knows so well, and Patrick Geddes was a hero of a different tradition, a different, let's say, maybe not so visible nowadays, family of approach that we are trying to as a biologist, also to reintroduce nature and living nature from the beginning in the idea of our environment. So that was first reaction.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think Patrick Geddes is super interesting. I revisited Patrick Geddes recently because I was asked to write about Thomas Saratino installation in Barcelona on top of that Nobel Tower.
The observatory tower of
yes.
Patrick Geddes.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly like the observatory. But it also made me think about Thomas, which probably obsession with the spiders, yeah. You know, when he did his installation recently in New York, in that building of Liz Diller. ¿Cómo se llama? They said he made it clear that in the contract it was clear that they couldn't kill any spider in the building prior to his installation of the and you know, he went around making sure that they were before he brought his own spiders, he went around looking, and he found that there were many spiders around, right? He would have had a heart attack listening to the hymn saying that you have to spray the house every 6 weeks with insecticides and kill all the insects. Of course, I was in the inauguration of your vertical. It was fantastic. I didn't know this story of the lady bugs, but of course it's right that you don't have the control. I brought the case of Lina because I think very much, and I wanted to emphasize this point, I suppose, that history, as Mark Bloch say, is not about the past, it's about making visible the urgent problems of our time. And I found that in this moment, thinking about Lina Bo, I refuse to call her Lina Bobardi for obvious reasons, is absolutely to the point, right? In this, it brings us all these issues of our. I mean, I've seen actually Ray Eames drawing, and Charles too, but more Ray drawing every plant, every tree that was in the side of the house where they were the Eames house, right? And she practically had a heart attack when they had to take down one of the big trees that was on the site for the construction of the house. But I never seen an architect that goes to travel to find out all the little animals that are living there, like saying this habitat is already taken, and I'm going to intervene there, but I'm going to let them live with me, right? And I think that's a very different attitude than that of the modern architect idea of keep all the bugs out, right? And we are paying in a way for this kind of sterile spaces with the kinds of health problems that we have. I mean, you know, I think the whole question of the microbiome is relevant, as I say, only for architecture, only as much as we are implicated. We are implicated in a way. We created spaces that are reducing the quality of our bacteria, and therefore it's a problem for architecture.
Yeah, I think it's we still have not well learned from COVID-19 what we have to, let's say, to understand from that tragedy. I believe that, well, for sure, when we became aware that there was a microorganism inside our body that was, let's say, part of humanity, that was a shock, and is still a shock. And the point is how we can elaborate this shock, because from another point of view, we know that this kind of biodiversity that you are describing so well at the micro scale is something that helps us to straighten our defenses. No, that there are many survival research that are explaining very well how, for instance, kids that are growing in an environment with plants are developing immunitarian defenses much better than other kids of the same age that grew up in a courtyard which is only with concrete and mineral.
This scientist that I mentioned,
it's such a
Martin
absolutely.
Blesser is the one that wrote the book "Let Them Eat Dirt." Let your children eat dirt.
Exactly.
Because precisely with this mania of the antibiotic shops and all of this, American kids have more problems, more allergies, more strange things than kids in other parts of the world. So the message was very clear: let them eat dirt.
Yeah.
So it's all about prosemic. Now, prosemic, but the discipline was very important in the 60s. We have completely forgotten. And it was like a series of let's say, rules about how to establish the right distance with things. No? So if you think of how, for instance, what you're saying about plants or in hospital, how much we just discussed it, I think it was this morning, how the presence of plants is so important in the health of the patient. Yeah. At the same time, you are not allowed to have a plant inside your room, inside your hospital room. It's basically still not possible because bacteria could be, let's say, diffused by the plants. So, and that's.
But the problem is that the bacteria that is in the hospital is the one that is really dangerous. This bacteria resistant to antibiotics that is in these spaces. That's the problem. It's been demonstrated now that it will be safer to have an operation with an open window than in these supposedly sterilized places that we call, whatever we call these places where we have operations. What are they called?
Yeah,
Yes,
sterilized.
Sterilized, yes. I mean, it's more dangerous not to go to a hospital than not. If you can avoid it, don't go, because actually the problems that you may catch up there may be much worse than the ones that you went in with. And that's why so many things have changed. You know, when I had my child, you were supposed to be in the hospital 4 to 5 days. Now my daughter had a child last year, is 1 day. Right? Why? Because they don't want to keep them any longer than 1 day there, because something else can happen. And this is because the medical community is perfectly aware that the dangers are bigger than they used to be, and it's safer to go home in many, you know, you're on your own.
Yeah, I think also it is very interesting from the real point of view, and both as we consider this as a sort of metaphor in considering how we can coexist with the other, I mean, with other beings, with other things, with things that we don't really know and we cannot really control. And so what was really fascinating to me listening at your lecture is that at the end I found so many things that cross the thought and the things that we heard in these days, starting from the return, let's say, of the life in the center of architecture. This, was, of course, is the first one, but with a sort of different behavior, different themes. So if we see the Leonardo man or the modular, and we see the several times that Lina Bo is inside the pictures that you showed us. Lina is a super alive figure, but beside or inside her plans, so it's more mixed with the environment, with other being, more in exchange with other things, but still alive there. So this is somehow I feel it as a sort of metaphor of what you say about the bacteria and the fact that we are contaminated, and the contamination is a richness.
Right. I found the period in which Lina actually leaves Bardi in Sao Paulo and goes to Bahia very, very interesting. The way she starts collaborating with so many different people, activists, filmmakers, but also indigenous communities, and how she developed a method of work that involved all these other communities. And I think that's an incredibly interesting moment. About what you were saying before about COVID, or whether we have learned or not learned, I mean, I found very interesting that you could say that the history of the city is the history of health crisis. I will argue that one could write a whole history of the city from the point of view of all the pandemics that have affected us. If we think, for example, about cholera, about typhus, etc., about all the ways, all the infrastructure that was put in place, the sewage system, etc. We don't think about the embankment of London now having anything to do with health. But that was a very beautiful response to actually a very dramatic situation in which millions of people were dying from cholera because the sewage is included. So we don't think about Haussmann. We talk a lot about Haussmann in terms of protection from riots, etc. But we don't know that Haussmann was actually obsessed with health, had huge amount of medical, and that a lot of these boulevards and had to do with ventilation, air, bringing trees, etc., bringing nature into the city, Central Park, I mean all this. So we have been responding always to crisis. And the amazing thing about pandemics is that as soon as they pass, we all develop collective amnesia. We don't remember. Nobody remembered the 1918 flu. Nobody remembered it. I'm not kidding. I mean, I read the book because I'm obsessed with illnesses when I was writing X-ray architecture, and the guy that wrote the book, Boeri, about the history of the flu of 1918, writes in the preface that he's surprised that nobody had written the book before. COVID happened. No, not only had not written the book, nobody had written the book about the 1918 flu, which killed more people than the war, than the two wars combined, right? I mean, and not only that, but the book had no readership, only a few kind of crazy people like me. COVID happened, and the book became a bestseller. So only with another epidemic we become interested in what happened with the 1918. And of course, as soon as COVID passed, we will try to develop, I mean, still we are in this moment, but we will develop amnesia for sure, and we will not think that anything happened. But it will have had an impact in the way we live and in our architecture, as all the other epidemics did. And we will see it retroactively, I think.
Sì, that's right.
Thank you. I don't know if there are any questions or comments from the public.
Grazie. So in 2018, I had the privilege to visit closely the Farnsworth House, a few kilometers far from Chicago, through the PhD program. We spent there like 2 weeks, and actually we occupied the house for a few days, investigating with some colleagues that I know they are here. And it was quite impressive to discover all the story behind the house and the legal issue also between Edith Farnsworth and Mies. I mean, that is, of course, is Mies. So basically, she described herself as a princess full of anxiety inside this sort of cage that actually was made by steel and glass. So everything was transparent, and you had really a close relation with the river in front and the trees, the green. So I was a bit shocked because, you know, you go, you cross the ocean. I mean, you arrive in Chicago full of expectation about the story that someone teach you in the university, and then you turn the postcard. You understand that. I mean, it's quite complex, the reality. So it's quite impressive how in the Lina Bo house, she was also basically the client behind herself as an architect. So I was curious your opinion about this relation between the expectation and the ambition also of a project, and this kind of logical system between client, architect, surroundings. It's quite uncertain. I mean, there are no recipe sometimes. Also, when you deal with a master like Mies or Lina Bo. So just your opinion about this. Thank you.
Okay, so now Lina Bo, who has not been written in any history of modern architecture, whether it's Tafuri or whether it's Frampton or ignored by history, is a master. I'm very happy to hear that we reckon the artists were the first to recover Lina. It was interesting. It was the art world that first started to pay attention, but it's interesting that now a new generation puts her in the list of the great masters. Masters, oh my God. But anyway, so yes, Farnsworth was not a princess. Farnsworth was actually a very good doctor, a specialist in kidneys. She commissioned Mies to do a house, a weekend house for her, and the house in many ways turned out to be beautiful, because it's amazingly beautiful, but unlivable in so many different ways. In many ways, in the ways we were describing, that there is this glass walls that not only expose her to the view of her neighbors. She describes arriving in her house from a long week of working in Chicago, turning on the light, and the telephone rang. The neighbors knew that she had arrived, right? So she was completely exposed, but also there were all kinds of problems. Lina house, Farnsworth house, the house of Philip Johnson in Connecticut, the Eames house are all from the same year, and they are so very different, right? If you think about the Johnson house, it's also made for himself. He is the client and the architect, and nevertheless you can say that's a house that you cannot live in. It's demonstrated even by the way in which it's like a showroom. If you look at pictures the day it was inaugurated in 1949 and pictures of it now, the same furniture in the same place, as if nobody has ever lived there, right? You compare it to the house of the Eames. You look at the pictures and you can practically date the pictures. Oh, it's Christmas because there's a Christmas tree. Oh, it's Easter because there are Easter decorations. Oh, they have been to India, or they have been to New Mexico because so they allow that the inhabitant can bring all the paraphernalia of their They are souvenirs, they are things from all over the world into the house and transform it constantly, right? But the houses of Mies and of Johnson are like immovable, right? There's no life there, speaking of life, right? Lina is different. Lina in many ways is bringing all kinds of things into, you can see, oh, now she's working on the project of Bahia because you can see a model of the staircase, or now she's been to the Amazon because look at this object, you know, you can tell. But also the house is open in so many different ways. I mean, the tree passes through the house. You've seen the back of the house. All kinds of animals and insects and things are circulating there in a way that they don't in the other houses. Even today, when you go, there are so many animals on site. Last time I was there, in the garden in the back, there were these cats, and there was one that was looking at me like that, and I thought to myself, oh my God, it's Lina, she's reincarnated as a cat, because she loves cats.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I think this idea of of losing control with the incredible image that you show of the new ruin of Lina that allow other species to enter on the Sas Pompeia, to enter and to, like, come on, let's do it together and to collaborate. Right. And this is a sign of hospitality somehow, right. And of cooperation. So the losing of control for gaining a collaborative approach to project and to life, probably. Yeah. So this is something sort of homage to the porous city, also an homage again to Richard Sennett here in front of us, and I think incredible program for future, very radical. Thank you very much. I don't know if, yeah.